If you don't know who WITHWENDY is on YouTube, you should really get to know her. Check out her videos. She's been on YouTube for a while now and she has close to 1 million subscribers at this point. She makes videos like DIY projects, organization videos, self-care, and she even dabbles in bullet journaling. But what I really love about her channel is these videos she does called thrift flips. She goes to the thrift store, she gets something that's outdated, and she just revamps it, restyles it, and makes it new for today's style. Recently, for one of these thrift flips, she got one of those old, outdated skirt suit sets that they're always at the thrift store, you never know what to do with them, and she just totally revamped it and made it modern and cute for today, kind of a la Clueless. It was really cute. And so for today's video, I want to try to take her tips and guidance from her own video and use it for myself, and try to make a cute, modern skirt suit set. So how exactly did I do this? Well, first I watched her video, of course, got an idea of what to do, and then I needed supplies, so I did my favorite activity ever. I went to the thrift store. For this project, I got this skirt from Goodwill. It's just a basic gray skirt from Express. And this jacket I got as well. The two actually were not a set, but they matched perfectly. The jacket's unlined, which will make my job a whole lot easier. I'm not gonna have to rip out any lining. I also got really good deals on these. This was half off of $5.15 for the skirt, and half off of $7.25 for the jacket. I already had this fabric in my fabric stash. It's from a previous project I've done. It's just a basic polyester pink satin. I've been waiting for the perfect project to use these scraps for, and I think this will be perfect to line the cuffs. I also got this men's button-up from Goodwill. They're always there, there's always a ton of them, and I want to try to figure out a way to do a thrift flip on these as well. Let me know if you want to see that. Here's a quick glimpse of how these clothes fit before I altered them. Jacket's okay, but the skirt's a little big on the waist. My approach is going to be a little different than Wendy's, and that's just because we found different things at the thrift store. Sometimes that happens. You have to think on the fly and figure out a different way to solve a problem than maybe something you're using as an example. For instance, her skirt was a floor-length skirt, so she had to shorten it. Mine is pretty much at the length I already need it to be. Also, her jacket had a lining in the sleeves that she was able to use as a pattern for making a different lining, that pop of color in the cuff. I don't need to do that because my jacket doesn't have a lining, but that also means I'm going to have to make my own pattern for the lining. I'm a little intimidated by this because I'm not the best pattern drafter, but I think this is a simple enough project to get some practice. I jotted some notes down just so I wouldn't forget anything during the project, so all I had to do was number 1, draft the cuff lining pattern, number 2, sew that lining to the cuff, and number 3, take in the waist of the skirt. First step, I need to create the pattern for the cuff lining. First I had to unpick the blind hem on the edge of the sleeve so I could get access to the raw edge. I need this raw edge to draft the pattern. Then I just laid the sleeve of the jacket flat on a piece of tissue paper and traced around all edges, leaving room for seam allowance. I also made sure to flip the jacket along one edge so I could get the full circumference of the sleeve, not just one half. Then I cut the pattern out and it looks like this. It basically looks like just a bottom half of a full sleeve pattern. Now it's time to cut the lining pieces from the pattern I made. My lining had these weird stains on it. I honestly don't know where they came from, so I chose to use actually the wrong side of the fabric for my right side because the stains were less apparent. I quickly noticed that the pattern piece is not going to fit on the scraps I had, so I had to think on the fly. I figured out that if I pieced this in a certain way, then I could create the surface area I need to cut this pattern out. So I'm going to stitch along that line, fold it back, and then I'll have enough fabric to work with. Here's my cat Turkey. She had to join in the party. Me and my fiance always joke if there's some sort of square object in the room, whether it be 2-dimensional like this tissue paper or 3-dimensional like a box, she's going to sit on it. At this point I'm just sewing along that edge that I demonstrated before, just so I can get more surface area to work with and cut out that pattern piece. Wait, pause. Did anyone else see that? My bobbin thread ended at exactly the right point. If you sew, you understand. At this point, I'm ironing the stitch line I just made, and, well, what a surprise, there's starch all over my iron, so it will not slide on the fabric. Just a note, don't get starch all over your iron. And yes, I do iron on the floor like the adult that I am. After ironing, I cut off the excess fabric from the seam line, opened up the fabric, and voila! I have enough fabric to work with now to lay down my pattern and cut around all the sides. Here's my two pieces. They're the same size, I promise. I think it's the way I'm holding the camera. Next, I need to sew the lining. So once I have that piece cut out, I fold it in half to make a long tube, and I sew along this edge. Sometimes when I sew, I like to have my tape measure handy just so I can check my seam allowances. I allotted 5/8 of an inch for this. So once I lined that up, I stuck my needle down, aligned the edges of the fabric, and sewed along the edge. And here I am ironing on the floor again. The starch wasn't so much of a problem this time, maybe because it was already hot. This time, however, I'm featuring a roll of socks that my cat uses as a cat toy, because I'm not a proper seamstress and I don't have a tailor's ham or a sleeve board, whatever you call it, to iron this seam properly. So yes, I'm using a tube of socks. Next, I needed to hem the edge of the sleeve. I'm just going to roll it simply like this and sew along the edge. I'm going to pin it all the way around just to make my life easier. This part was tricky just because it was a snug fit and I actually sewed on the wrong pieces of fabric a few times, so go slow. Also, the sheer volume of the layers of fabric were giving me trouble, and I eventually switched to a walking foot. If you don't know what that is, it's a special attachment to your machine that makes your life easier when you sew through a lot of layers. The walking foot actually hops up a little bit to jump over the layers of fabric. Now for the fun part. We get to attach the lining to the sleeve. This part's a little confusing regarding how you arrange the pieces, so let me walk you through it. Slide the jacket sleeve inside of the lining sleeve, making sure that the raw edges are aligned. Then, sew around the circumference of both, attaching the two together. It should look like this. Then, it's really simple after that. You just turn it inside out. You might be wondering if the lining was just flapping around at this point, and it was, but I wasn't too bothered by that because I was going to have my cuffs rolled most of the time anyway, so I just tacked it to the seam allowance. Now for the last step, taking in the waist of the skirt. For this part, I put the skirt on inside out and pinned on each side seam how much I wanted to take it in. In my case, it was about 0.75 inches on each side. Now this is the scary part. To do this, you're going to have to deconstruct your skirt. But I firmly believe in doing this with your clothes every now and then. You learn a lot just from taking clothes apart, so don't be scared. You're going to spend, what, $2 on this from the thrift store? So just examine your skirt, look at where all the seams are, and figure out step by step how it was constructed, and then take it apart in the reverse. At this point, you'll be looking at your skirt half deconstructed and wondering, oh my god, can I put this back together? Did I just totally ruin this skirt for no reason? You can put it back together, I promise. If anything, take pictures while you're taking it apart, so you can figure out how to put it back together again. In my case, the first step I need to do is re-sew the side seam. Remember, it needs to be 0.75 inches narrower on each side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin the side seams together, and starting at the top, measure 0.75 inches in from the old seam line, and then gradually start there and meet to the original seam line all the way at the bottom of the hem. You want this to be as smooth as possible. So here I am at the sewing machine, sewing that new seam line on the side, using my tape measure to make sure that I start 0.75 inches in from the original seam line and gradually make my way back to the original seam line towards the bottom of the skirt. Then I tried the skirt on just to see how I did. I could tell the bottom of the skirt looked a little goofy, which means that that line I made with my stitching was not gradual enough, so I redid it. Then I repeated this whole process on the other side seam. Now for the tricky part. I need to put the waistband back together again. But before I do, let me pause for a second and walk you through waistband construction, just in general. Generally speaking, when you put a waistband on a skirt or a pair of pants, it usually consists of one wide piece that goes all the way around the circumference of the skirt or the pants, Then it folds along this green line here, wraps around to the interior of the skirt of the pants to make the waistband. Then you just stitch everything together. However, my skirt is not like this. It's not one big piece that's folded, it's actually two separate pieces. So I'm gonna sew this seam line first that I have pinned, then I'll repeat on the other part of the waistband. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure again 0.75 inches in from the old seam line. This will keep everything consistent. Once I brought both pieces of the waistband in by 0.75 inches on both sides, I was finally able to put the whole skirt back together again. Well, that was it. I did all 3 steps. Are you ready to see the finished product? I am so happy with how this turned out. I really think I will wear this all the time. I was a little intimidated by the style of it. I'm just not that creative when it comes to style, and I want to get better about it. And this is so comfortable and it came out so cute that I think I really will be comfortable wearing it. And I think it turned out pretty similar to Wendy's project too. I'm really happy with how this turned out, and I think you should try it.